Welcome to the About podcast. Here we explore your financial health in simple and easy to understand ways.
All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to the About podcast. All things financial health is in our wheelhouse. And today it is just Roy and I. Roy.
Yes, sir.
Just us.
This is unique. It almost feels a little weird not having someone else in the room.
I know. We had this debate before the camera turned on about
where do I sit?
It's like, where do we sit? And do we take the extra chair out? And I'm like, no, we got it. We're good.
But this makes it so I don't have to turn my head so much, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm just going to do it this way.
It's not. We haven't had a falling out or anything like that.
No,
I think that's important to say. But, well, today we are going to talk about giving.
Charitable
giving, which is kind of a subset, and I'm sure has some special meaning in your world, like what qualifies as charitable giving.
Fun fact.
Okay.
I always ask my clients, are you charitably inclined? Because there are some parameters that I want to make sure they're educated around that, right? And we're going to talk about that today, but probably 90% of the time they say, well, I do give, but are my children considered a charity? I said, no, that's not the type of charity I'm talking about.
Well, sometimes they kind of feel that way.
Yes. So it's always funny because people always joke about that.
Yeah. Well, obviously a big part of my world, everything that I get to do in my day-to-day life as a pastor is funded by the generosity of others. And sometimes people don't know that. I remember as I was thinking through this conversation, I was remembering something years and years and years ago. My father-in-law was asking about one of the little Methodist churches in the next town over, and they're like, well, I assume there's must be other bigger churches somewhere that help them out. I don't see how they can stand on their own or, pay their bills and all by themselves. And I'm like, no, I promise you, they take care of their own. They got to take care of their own selves. So that's not really how it works. I joke all the time, like, especially in the church, like, we don't sell hamburgers, right? We don't have anything else. We rely on the generosity of others.
We sell salvation.
We sell salvation. There you go. Yeah. Fire insurance, as some would say. Not quite. Nope.
Not that, folks.
No, not that, but there are. There's a lot of. There's a huge chunk of the economy in general that I don't think always gets kind of thought or talked about all that much, and it's the nonprofit world that is, really, driven by people and their giving. We have, I can't remember, I meant to look up the stats, I forgot, but I think the United States continues to be, one of the most charitably inclined countries. If you look at, how much we give per capita, we're usually, top 2, top 3,
yep.
In the world as far as, which is good.
We are very charitable.
Yes.
Our tax code does help that to some extent.
Right.
But I think people would give anyways.
Yeah.
And when you have and you want to help people, you're doing it because you want to, not because you're getting some benefit from it.
Right.
Financially speaking.
Right.
But, giving is a big deal and understanding how to give. And I was just at a conference in San Francisco. The Financial Planning Association does a big conference there every year. And I was just around top planners. It was really enjoyable. But one of the things that I sat in on as a charitable giving presentation, and interesting fact that kind of shocked me is that the millennials are actually a generation of givers.
Really?
They want to give.
Okay.
They don't know how to give.
Oh.
So anyways, it's gonna be kind of fun to learn more about that and also help educate, because that's part of what today's about, is helping people educate on how they can give and the different pros and cons of different ways of giving and what's the amount and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So today we're basically talking mostly about, charitable giving to qualified charities. So like a
true 501c3.
Yeah, like your church or a 501c3, Habitat,
a
United
nonprofit
Way.
by the U.S. tax code.
Yeah, nonprofit by the U.S. tax code, because not necessarily like handing the guy standing on the street corner $5, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but that's not quite what we're talking about. We're talking about that kind of. And then for me, I think the giving that you take on almost as a discipline, like as an intentional practice. Oh yeah, way of life, an intentional practice of giving. Obviously we try to teach people that and encourage that around here. Not just for the church. I mean, obviously we got bills to pay like everybody else does, and most nonprofits do. But just that thoughtful intentionality about
there's lots of ways to do it. And recently, a client of mine, they love animals.
Oh,
they take their animal to a lady that is a nonprofit that just asks for a donation. So she's 100% funded as a nonprofit and is just donation, provide a donation upon your service. And no dollar amount is tied to that. Just whatever you want to give.
Nice.
So, it's whether it's something like that or whether it's something like a church or whether it's any other myriad of nonprofits out there that exist, you can give to any of those.
And there's a lot of creative ones now. There's a lot of people doing some really interesting creative things in the space. I don't know if it's still there. There used to be a place down in Denver called The Same Cafe, and it was a nonprofit 501c3, but it was a cafe, and you basically paid what you would.
There was one in Loveland.
Yeah, no set price, no nothing. So if you just needed something to eat, you could come in and just eat. But if you had the ability to pay, then there was they would take your money. But there was no set amount for whatever was going on.
Yeah, the difficulty with that is sometimes people don't pay and then you just don't have any money. So
right.
so
Yeah,
they can't. It's not perpetual unless you have an endowment that's kind of funding it.
Right. Yeah. They were definitely doing some outside fundraising and some outright, some fundraising events and that kind of stuff.
So let's start with we're going to get into the actual giving, but let's understand what we're giving to a little bit and structures and kind of the different designs of things. Because let's just start with the church because that's what obviously you're super familiar with.
Right.
You've also worked in other places, but in a church specifically, right? You can give in basically three ways. I would say, like for our situation, you have to pay the bills, which we call keep the lights on.
Yep.
Right, and we got to have money to pay the bills.
Right, and some people kind of shy away from that a little bit, but I'm like, it's not. We have a building. Like the Excel does not, accept baptisms on trade for the power bill, right? I mean, you gotta, and we have insurance, and and then staff and salaries, and all the stuff that any kind of small business, might have. In fact, I when I went to seminary, I was a little surprised that that there wasn't a small business course thrown in there or something because it's essentially what you're doing. You've got a lot of the similar kind of opportunities and challenges that any.
Well, and having a pastor and having staff and
yeah,
all of those fun things that we like to have, right? Cost money too. So it's kind of like you have these ongoing bills you have to pay, but then like you mentioned, we have a building.
Right.
So, you need new carpet from time to time, new paint, something breaks, a door, door hinge breaks, which we've had that recently.
We did.
Those things don't just take care of themselves either. It costs money. So then we have this, it's the same guise of like, I give it to the church, but we call it Fund the Future.
Right.
So it's like paying for things that are going to happen that we know are going to come, like someday you need a new roof and things like that we're trying to save for so we don't actually have to borrow to pay that. So again, it's all about being a good steward, right?
Right.
So you kind of give to keep the lights on, you give to kind of make sure that capital projects in the future can be funded that are not going to be, having to be borrowed and pay interest and cost the church more or the nonprofit entity.
Yeah.
Would you say those kind of the main two that people give to just kind of on the day-to-day?
Yeah, that's the day-to-day is what kind of in standard terms you would call it the general fund, and that's what you pay, all that kind of stuff. And then the capital improvement fund.
Okay. And then the third way realistically is the endowment.
Yes.
So that time is a lot of times like gifts. Maybe you leave some of your estate to upon your death. And that endowment is more perpetual.
Yeah, so a lot of churches and nonprofits in general will have some kind of endowment fund where you have a kind of chunk of cash out there that's, that its job is to make money, right? And so hopefully if you're doing things right, then you're taking from, interest earned and all that and not, putting the principal in any kind of risk, any tremendous amount of risk. So it just kind of keeps going. It's, we call
perpetual.
We call it the lasting impact fund. It's just like you can give this gift and, and that gift's going to, give a little gift, every year for ever.
And I think this is a good, a good explanation of like when you give to anything, this is kind of the concept, right?
Right.
Like you're really giving to operational expenses, capital expenses that are just needed, for whatever it is, for whatever organization it is, or you're giving to some sort of entity that has an endowment that is perpetual, that's ongoing. So if you give $1 to an endowment, instead of them taking that dollar and spending it to pay the bills, they take that dollar, invest it, and then that dollar creates interest and dividends that then can help fund. Like for us, we largely fund our children's ministry.
Yeah.
Right. So whatever the funding is, but that creates income every year that's spun off to fund something, right? Perpetually, right? And in the news lately has been the college endowments and whatnot that are so huge that you're like, oh my gosh, those are gigantic.
Yeah, I've heard Harvard described once as a multi-billion-dollar endowment with a small liberal arts school attached.
Wow, it's gigantic. I didn't realize the billions of dollars they had in there.
Billions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then they use that money though to spin off income every year, then whatever they choose to spend it on within the design of the university system, right?
Right.
Ours would be the church system, or we were just talking about the dog shelter, their system, whatever.
Yeah.
So that'd be the concept, right? Has to meet the rules of the nonprofit. They have to go through being able to prove that to the United States government, I guess, right? There's a documentation process you have to go through, right?
Yeah. If you're talking, especially like a more of a general 501c3, that would be like your food banks and your habitats and all those kind of groups.
My Rotary Club, we actually have an endowment.
Oh.
Right. And that endowment is local to our community. There's also the Rotary International Endowment too. But we do actually have a local endowment. Same concept, right? So we use it to fund youth programs.
Yeah.
In the community, and scholarships and leadership trainings, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and sometimes you're your own 501c3 and you've gone through all that work, which is not an easy thing to do. I mean, there's a lot of registered nonprofits in the United States. I can't remember, it was just the other day I heard it, and it was huge. But it's not actually easy to get. I mean, there's a lot you have to prove. You got to have a board of directors. You've got to have
bylaws,
all that kind of stuff. You get bylaws
and
everything just to make sure you're being governed correctly and everything. And of course, you're open to being audited like any other organization and stuff. So there's some that are independent 501c3s, and there's others like our church, because we're part of a denomination, we don't have to go through the our own 501c3 process. We are just
part of the greater church.
We're part of the greater church, which has already done that work. I imagine it's fairly similar with Rotary.
Yeah, we actually have our separate 501c3 actually.
Okay.
To have a local foundation, we have to have our own.
We have our own. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so sometimes you see those kind of things that are, kind of more of a charity that's kind of more of like a franchise organization.
Yeah, they just get the status, by osmosis.
Yeah. But that also means, in some of those organizations, that also means there's also a structure over them that is, hopefully, is holding them accountable to what they do and everything. Because
there's rules.
On the receiving end, the most important thing for me, and I think anyone who works in the nonprofit world on the receiving end, is you have to, people can't lose faith in what's happening with their money, right? Like that's the biggest thing you cannot lose, is you can't let people lose faith in it, which means if they give something, and you say this is what it's for, then you really have to
spend
do that, right? Yeah. I mean, and there's laws around that, I mean, for sure, but it's also just good management. Nobody likes it to find out that they gave for one thing and the money was used for something else, right? Because I think giving is one of those things that, one of those places we all have an emotional connection to our money, but giving, I think, especially money that we give
something
charitably,
you really care about.
Yeah, because you wouldn't do it otherwise. It's optional, right? You don't have to do it.
Yep.
So you're doing it because you want to do it, because you believe in the organization or whatever. So you have that extra, kind of, emotionality around it.
Kind of big time emotional connection is, a lot of people at the end of life, you deal with an organization called hospice, and a lot of people give to hospice because it's a comfort thing at the end of life, and it's a very emotional experience.
Yeah.
So people will donate to that kind of an organization that helps with that kind of stuff because they know other people need it too. Right. I really look at giving as a way of paying it forward, right?
Right.
You've been blessed in life through your works, and you've made a good income doing it, and you don't necessarily need all of that income, so you pay it forward to help others that don't have the same fortunate situation that you have. Yeah. And hopefully they can get out of their situation, and then, same thing. It creates this perpetual experience for people.
Yeah, I think so. One of the,
or whole, salvation, whatever.
Whatever. But the whole thing about this podcast is, trying to help people think and be more intentional about their financing and their resources. But giving is a part of that. And, in order to give in a serious kind of regular way, you first kind of have to have some kind of handle on what you have, and, I know, like, when I'm writing, our monthly, donations, and not checks anymore, but, watching the deposits go out or whatever, I always feel, I feel blessed, because I'm like, how interesting and how wonderful that I'm in a place of life where I can do that.
Yep.
Right. And it's not necessarily a trade-off. There's trade-offs to it. There's other things I could do with the money.
Well, yeah, it's like, well, geez, I could have a cup of coffee every day from Starbucks, or I can maybe just not give that money away.
Right.
That's really what we're talking about, right? Somebody, you're sacrificing something in your personal life, whether that's eating out or whether that's going on this trip or whatever, to be able to give. Because you could do something else. You could buy a new computer.
Right. You could. But but also, there's a little bit like, what kind of world do you want to live in? And I like living in a world where the things that I support exist. Yeah. Right. And truthfully, most, nonprofits, all nonprofits, I suppose, they're doing some good in the world. Otherwise they don't.
What else are they for?
What are they for? So they're feeding people, or they're educating people, or they're taking care of dogs, or, whatever it is. There's some good they're doing in the world that needs doing.
It wouldn't be done otherwise.
Right, and wouldn't be done otherwise. And that's the kind of thing. And I like living in a world where those kind of things get done. And then the question is, like, if not then what's the alternative, for making sure, all this stuff and people get cared for in the way they need to get cared for. And the nice thing about, especially, nonprofits and everything, is they are much more, they tend to be able to be much more flexible in what they do, and much more adaptable what they do than, say, like government programs that may be aimed at the same thing. There are government programs, to fight hunger and all that, and there should be. That should be part of our collective work together, through that process. But those programs are never going to be as flexible and as easy and quick to respond as your local food bank.
They're usually not run as well either.
Right.
Let's just be honest. We try and stretch a dollar. What's crazy what we do to stretch a dollar is a church entity, right?
Right.
Whereas sometimes when you're at a government level, it's just not thought through the same way, right?
Right.
And that's the difference.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. If you want to see an incredibly low to no waste organization pop into your local community food bank. You want to watch a bunch of people stretch a dollar.
It's crazy what they can do.
It's what they can do, and everything that goes in goes out, and it's just and honestly, you're also dealing with people, because you're dealing with passionate people. A lot of times, the people working there, they're volunteers.
Yes.
Right? And so they're even the people doing the work are there
salaries to pay or any of that stuff.
Right. But they're also there because they want to be.
Yep.
Right. And they believe in what it is. And so, a group of people passionate about something, some kind of good work that needs to be done in the community. And then, what a blessing to be able to, like, give and contribute to that. Yep. And know and have faith that good is being done.
So for every person out there, you have to decide, what is that you care enough about. Do your research around them too, to make sure that things are being, done well. So
yeah,
it's always one of those things where, I'm a bit biased because I run money for a living.
Yeah.
And I sit on the board. Well, I shouldn't say that. I sit on oversight committees that, anything that I give to, I'm on the oversight of.
Yeah.
Because, I like to know what's going on with the money.
Yeah.
But you also, have to, each person listening has to do their own due diligence to make sure that whatever you're giving to, is that money actually being stewarded in the way that you think it's going to be stewarded, right?
Right.
Because we've all heard about that, where, you give to this cause of hurricane relief, whatever, and then all the money's pillaged.
Right.
And you're doing it, all these people are doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They care, they want to help, and then that money doesn't even get to the people that need it.
Right.
So you really have to do a lot of work around that. There is an app out there called Charity Navigator that I've used before that's pretty decent at, if you have an organization that's large enough that you want to kind of do some research on, like, how much are they spending on overhead versus how much are they actually giving to the actual cause. That's kind of a nice tool to look at and to
well,
understand.
and it also helps you see some history. Like, is this something that just got, every time there's a natural disaster, something
pop up.
Something pops up, and sometimes they're good. My wife was involved in setting up when Lions flooded in 2013. They stood up a community organization pretty darn quick called LEAF. I can't remember what is an acronym for something. Lions something. But I mean, and that's what they just needed to do, because they wanted to have a place to receive gifts and distribute and kind of take care of take care of people on the ground level. So those things it's not necessarily a bad thing but
there's always
sometimes.
Scammers that they always get into the mix, and you just have to be really careful with what you're giving to, so that you're not getting scammed yourself. But
and on that note, by the way, the one thing we're not talking about today is like GoFundMe.
No, we're not talking about
Which,
GoFundMe.
I mean, there's a role and a place for GoFundMe. I don't have necessarily, it's not necessarily, again, not a bad thing, but the level of due diligence required is even higher around those kinds of things.
So this is True Charities.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. We set the table of what is a charity, kind of what's the oversight things to look for, what kind of organizational pieces are that exist. So now let's say you're going to give. You've chosen to give. What's a good rule of thumb? When you teach classes to new members of the church.
I do.
You talk about charitable giving as part of that.
Yep.
What's the extent of what you guys talk about in those classes?
It varies a little bit, but I mean, part of it is just the kind of the practical reality of what it costs. I mean, we share, honestly, we share the budget and, what it, the fact that this is what it costs to run this place. And my, my standards feel like all we have is you. So my goal for them, for everybody, is to move in a place where they're giving in an intentional way, right? And so it's a thoughtful amount. It's not just here's a tip.
Yep.
It's like good sermon today. Here's $10, and I'm like,
good job today. Last week was 5.
Yeah. Like, no tip for you today. This is a lousy sermon. But in an intentional way. And, for the longest time, kind of 10% has been, the metric. The people are like, well, it's in the Bible. I'm like, it's one of those things, you can find it if you look, but, Jesus never gave a hard and fast rule about it, because honestly, I think it's a great kind of starting place for the conversation to say, because that's a real amount of money. I mean, 10% of, your income is, for most people, a pretty decent amount of money. And so in an intentional amount. So, for some people, single mom, 3 kids, that's a stretch.
May not be able to
beyond it. And, I would never want, we would never want somebody's giving to, jeopardize their, basic needs being
paying
met,
rent and having food.
Yeah. By any means and all that kind of stuff. Plus, honestly, there are some people whose, spiritual gift is making money. Right, there are people who are just
people are really good at it.
Some people are really good at making money. So there are some, not a lot, but there are some who, frankly, 10% is not not much or not something that they're gonna feel.
It's not significant.
It's not significant, right? Yeah. And so I think it's a nice little metric. It's a nice little kind of starting place for the conversation. And oftentimes I ask people to be prayerful about when you think about what it would look like to do that, like, what is your response, right? And then and I invite people to be like, whatever that is a conversation between you and God.
Yep.
And something that you probably should pray about. Right?
It's always interesting too, because you say 10%, and usually people, it's a biblical reference, right, for most people, and you call it the first and the best.
Yes.
Right, is kind of the concept of you've been blessed, so you give to help others. And that 10% number, I always kind of say to people, like, if you're not willing to give $1 off of $10, or 10 cents off of $1, right? When you're talking about just cent, I got it in my hand right now, right? Will I give 10 cents from this dollar that I'm holding here to charity? You're not going to give 1,000 off of 10,000. Or 10,000 off of 100,000, right?
Yeah.
So conceptually, I try to take it down to something that's small, and I can understand 10 cents off of $1,
right?
$10,000 off of $100,000 though, that's whoa. Now hold up,
Right?
Back off here, buddy. This doesn't make sense to me to give $10,000.
Right.
But that's the concept, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of always walk people down that track of understanding what does that mean to give 10%,
Mm-hmm.
and is it after taxes or before taxes? And it was funny because I have my own walk of life, and I got to understand and learn things. And when I was in a previous career, I was talking to a colleague and saying, I was able to give 10% this year. And I'm like, this feels really good. And that was always my goal. And he said to me, is that 10% before taxes or after taxes? So gross or net, right? So it was after taxes. He's like, oh, that's really good you did that. But does that mean that the first and the best goes to the U.S. government?
Well,
and I was like, oh, ouch. So then, I made my next goal to give 10% of my gross.
There you go.
But everybody has to take a look at their own situation. You can only do what you can do. But you can also make decisions that affect that, sometimes can be wasteful and sometimes not wasteful and needed. And so you just have to make a call. Now, my goal was to get to 10% of gross. And I think that's a good guide.
I think so too.
I really do. Because you're really giving with intention at a 10% level.
Right.
And I also talk about 10% should go towards your savings. Stuff happens in life, right?
Yeah.
You need to have an emergency reserve. And then 10% towards your future.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 30% of your income right there.
Oh, yeah.
And then if we could live on the difference, the other 70%, that's a good rule of thumb.
Yep.
And it's just a rule of thumb. Everybody's situation is different.
Right.
Right?
But you got to have a starting place, and I do think it's that part is important, and I think there is like again, the kind of first of it, I like that. I mean, I know, like, we have it set up. I like things on auto pay. I'm just like, just take it. But at the first of the month, the first thing that comes out is the charitable stuff. Like, that's the first thing that comes out. You pay, you pay it forward, you pay to God first. And then the next thing that comes out is the savings, like whatever, whether it's emergency fund savings or just general savings or whatever. So you basically pay God, pay yourself, and then pay everybody else. And then the mortgage comes out on the 5th, right? I mean, it's just one of those sorts of things where it's like it's stacked it. It doesn't really matter because it all kind of comes out in the wash, I suppose. But I like that it's in that order, right? And it feels good to me when I, check my app and I see the little email receipts start coming in. It's always
interesting
places.
Talking to people about that experience because there's a million different ways people do it and how they view it. And, some people I need this account over here so I can hold that money so it pays that. And then they have like 15 accounts.
Right.
I'm like, okay, I get it. You do it how you need to do it. But, as long as it's getting to the end point that you're wanting to get to. Right. But it's just really fun to have those conversations with people. But that's a good guide. It's a good guide, right?
It is.
You get, and I think, the one piece we're not really talking about is why is giving so impactful on people's lives too? Because greed is a real thing. And when you hoard money and you're greedy over it, it creates fear. Yeah. And I'm going to lose this money. I'm not going to have this or whatever it is, right? But when you give and give willingly, that sense of greed, it seems like it's diminished.
Oh, okay.
Because you're giving to something that's bigger than yourself, more important than yourself. And I think that is a really impactful thing on people in general. And I'm not even talking spiritually, but you and I believe that. Yeah. But even if you just do it and you don't believe in God, I think it makes a real positive impact on you that separates you from this greed. It's like a disease.
Right.
And people just hoard it and they just get, Scrooge McDuck over it, right?
I was actually seriously picturing a giant pile of coins, gold coins and ducks swimming through them.
Right. But so that's just something that I've noticed.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's important because I never want to be that person that is just that greedy, awful, bitter person that everyone's against them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is scripture, God loves a cheerful giver. There are times when, you feel your heart pulled towards something, and you want to make an impact. And I think that's good. I don't think it's good when people on the receiving ends manipulate that. It's like, I wouldn't, I don't ask people to give out of any kind of sense of like guilt or shame or, whatever, like, that kind of stuff. I mean, that it just, first of all, it doesn't work. I mean, it's not something people tend to respond to more than
nobody
once.
wants to be shamed into something.
No. But you should feel good about it, and there's nothing wrong with it. But sometimes I have people who kind of like, they do feel they feel good about their giving, and then they feel bad for feeling good about it, right? I mean, it's like kind of this like we're all too nice
like
and polite. And I'm like,
PTSD.
am I allowed to feel good about what you give? I'm like, yes, you're allowed. You should have, you should have pride in what you do and the generosity you show, and it should feel good, and you should smile about it.
And that, guys, I don't know who said this. It could have even been you, by the way. But the concept is, around the question, how much should I give?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer was that I heard, give until it feels good.
Mm.
I don't know what that means for anybody, but when you feel good about that giving, like if you give $100, you're like, well, I can easily do that.
Right.
But $1,000, well, that's impactful to me, and that's going to make a pretty big impact on whatever I'm giving to.
Yes.
That feels good.
Yes.
So that's what I mean by give until it feels good.
Give until it versus give until it hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't give until it hurts. Give until it feels good.
Give until I don't think that was me, but I might steal it. That's that'll preach.
I liked that concept.
Yeah.
It was one I kind of anchored to. Obviously, that's why I'm repeating it.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of the guys around.
Yeah.
How to give, why to give, all that good stuff. Now let's talk about, if we're going to give, let's give in a way that makes sense in regards to the tax code.
Right.
Right. Because we're going to be educated if we're going to do this. Right. We're going to have financially educated people.
Yeah. Because there are some there are some tax advantages.
Exactly. So this is, I think, a misconception right now that exists today in our tax code in the year 2025.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm a single person, I file my taxes as a single person, you get a standard deduction of $15,000 automatically on your taxes. And if you give $10,000, a lot of people are like, well, I get to write that off. Well, that's actually not true,
right?
Because your giving's not above the $15,000 standard deduction,
right?
It's not a reason not to give, by the way, and that's not what I'm saying. But I am saying you need to understand there's actually no tax impact to your giving, right? So that's as a single giver. As a joint giver, filing your taxes jointly, $30,000 is the number.
Yeah.
So it's even a bigger number for a married household, right? So unless you're giving over that $30,000 number.
Right. Or you have a lot of other things that are added deductible. You're doing a lot of other things that are deductible, which most of us aren't. I can't remember what the stat is, but I mean, most people are under the standard deduction.
Well, and I always get my insurance, my mortgage interest is deductible. I'm like, that's a really small number.
Yeah.
It's not getting you where you think. So anyways, the concept is that's actually a misconception that exists today that people say to me. And I'm just like, oh, let's make sure we understand the rules here.
Right.
Now, by the way, at the end of this year, if the tax cuts that were put in 8 years ago, well, no, it was in the last administration under Trump, they put in the tax cuts.
Yeah.
It continued through the Biden administration, and now we're in the Trump administration, number 2. It's going to expire at the end of this year if they don't renew it.
Oh, I knew it expired. I wasn't sure when.
If they don't renew it, then the giving deduction number is going to be different, and we just have to pay attention to that for the next year. But it might be extended. We'll see. I don't know. They're working on that right now. Yeah. We'll see what happens. But we just go within the rules, and we got to know the rules in whatever tax year we're filing, and that's the rules currently. Okay. Yeah. Now, there's some kind of fun ways to maybe maneuver around that, right? So you can actually do what they call bunching or batching, however you want to look at it. But let's say I'm giving a single person, and I'm giving $10,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Well, I could actually bunch that and give in $20,000 in 1 year, and only that counts for 2 years of giving.
Yeah.
But I give it in 1 year, so then I actually get a $20,000 deduction off of my taxes.
Okay, gotcha.
Because of the numbers that I'm giving at, right?
Yeah.
So there's actually a lot of one of my friends goes to a different church, but that's the one thing that they do in their church. Is just encourage people like, hey, it's okay. We'll take it however we can get it. But,
right.
We do encourage you to try and take advantage of the tax code as well.
Yeah.
So, they'll do that. Now, that's if you have a charitable institution that you want to give to directly. Mm-hmm. But let's say you just like, I really give. I just don't know what to give to. I need to do some work, some research, whatever. There's a thing out there called a donor-advised fund. Now, the number one, by the way, you should be completely aware of this as a pastor.
Yeah, before we started recording, we started talking about oh, this is interesting.
So a donor-advised fund is actually the fastest growing segment of giving.
Okay.
In the United States. Okay. So what it is it's actually a charitable institution, right? That's within the tax code, allows the giver to give to the fund, right? You could call it the XYZ Family Fund, whatever, right? And you can give your $10,000 to that in 1 year. You still don't get, in 2025, you still don't get any real benefit from giving that, but instead of that going to some institution that maybe you're not sure who you want to give it to, you can actually put it in that fund and then give it at a later date, but you get to count it in the tax year that you gave it.
Okay.
So it's donor advised. So the donor gives it up the control of it, meaning that they can't take it back.
Right.
It has to stay in that fund or go to charity.
Right.
But they can give it at some point in the future.
Gotcha.
Okay. So same thing though. Let's say want to give that $20,000. You can put the $20,000 in 1 year into that fund, give $10,000 to the institution or the church or whatever in 1 year, and then the next year you give the next $10,000. And the difference is you can actually invest in those donor advised funds.
Oh.
Right. So you can have it invested. You don't have to.
Right.
But you can
right.
have it invested so that if it's maybe even a longer period of time, let's say it's a business owner, you had a really great year, you want to put away $500,000, but you're not going to give away all $500,000 in 1 year.
Right.
Well, now you can write that off in 1 year, but then distribute it out over a period of years in the future.
Yeah. I can
and then have that potentially grow, right?
I can see that'd be really helpful. There's and around here, you got people, they got landowners. This happened to a friend of mine. He was the pastor up in Laramie, and they decided they finally opened up their property for drilling, and they just backed a dump truck of money up to his house. Nice. And he's like, "What am I going to do with all this?"
Yeah,
and I think my friend's mom's like, "Well, we're going to have a lot of fun."
Yep.
Figuring out what to do, because he was
I'm a little disappointed you didn't say call Roy.
Yeah,
what is this?
I didn't know Roy at that time. This was a long time ago.
Okay.
But I could see where something like that, where he's like, I don't know what to do with this. There's a windfall, kind of thing. I'm like, I'm not sure to do this right now, but I know I want to do something with it. So I'm gonna put it off on this advised fund, and get it off my books and on my taxes and all that.
Yeah.
Stuff.
So it's a really nice tool that gives you some flexibility, which is pretty cool. And then if you pass away, by the way. You can name your heirs or whomever to actually continue based off of the design that you created of that, right? Like, so let's say we talk about that dog charity,
right?
So that they want that to go a certain amount every year to that dog fund, and then the kids can send that check every year from the donor advised fund, right?
Okay.
So there's some perpetual piece of that can exist, kind of like creating your own endowment, if you will.
Yeah, that's what it started sounding like.
You can, absolutely, because you can actually create a family foundation, right? I actually asked a lady that is really good at this at that financial planning conference I went to, and she's like, well, unless you have about $100 million that you're going to put into it, it probably doesn't make sense to do your own, because there's a lot of expense with setting it up and doing it all, and so if your family wants to be able to have a board that sits on it and they get paid and they fly to the Bahamas every year, unless you get $100 million, probably not worth doing.
Yeah.
So anything less than that, a donor advised fund is basically the same thing. It's just way less cost and way simpler to actually oversee it, because you can still actually have a board essentially of your family members or whomever make those decisions. They just can't benefit from it in any way.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
right?
You can't. No Uncle Bob's charity for whatever.
Right.
Okay.
And by the way, this is going to be a future podcast. I'm going to get a donor advised expert to come on and talk about specifically donor advised funds and rules and all the fun stuff that goes around that.
But that is something that a normal person could set up with a normal person amount of money. Work through.
You can give. I think it's like as low as $50. I think is like the starting point.
You or somebody like you can just help
they're just like, I'm not sure what to give to. I just know I want to give in the future. I just don't know where yet. It's a great way to start accumulating those assets. You can invest them, and put it towards something in the future. And all that investment growth goes. All of that's tax free to the charitable institution.
Okay.
So it's a pretty cool way of doing it.
Okay. So
also, another really cool thing is if you have let's say for instance. You have a stock that you own that has a really low cost basis, and if you ever sell it, you're like, man, I got to pay a ton of taxes on that. You can actually give that to the fund.
Oh.
And not have to pay the taxes on that.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's actually one of the ways that I'm actually going to try and start implement that in my own practice, is that you want to look at, okay, if you have a big capital gain on a taxable account, well, and you're charitably inclined anyways, well, let's just give it to this fund, and then you can dole it out to the institution that you want to give it to anyways.
Okay.
But it's a very easy way to implement that. And we do a lot of tax loss harvesting and stuff at the end of the year every year. So this would be like a tax gain harvesting, but not having to realize the gain. You just give it to charity instead, because you give to charity every year anyways.
Right. And the charity doesn't care.
Right.
Charity doesn't care.
They'll take your money one way or another.
Yeah. Well, as long as the check cashes, it doesn't really matter.
But it's easier to do it that way, because donor advised funds are set up to deal with investments, but a lot of institutions, especially churches and stuff, they don't typically have that set up seamlessly. Yeah, there's a lot more work that goes into it.
Yeah, it's a little interesting when somebody comes and is like, we want to give you some stock. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But that's when it's like, well, let's just call Roy and figure out how we're going to deal with this.
So there's just a lot of moving parts and levers to pull and all that good stuff, and signatures to be gotten.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting way of looking at a way to give but not have to identify the charity right out of the gate. So you can do it at a future date.
Yeah. Well,
or you can even leave, by the way, at death, a portion. Let's say you have a big estate, and same thing. You don't want to give it away today because what if I need it? But you can put it in your will that it goes into that fund at death. Then that fund, you can actually set up the rules around it on what it goes towards, and then it can be paid out to those charities in the future.
That's cool.
So it's really quite a unique thing that I think a lot of people are going to be much more interested in learning about because the fact that you don't give up control. And I don't know, the biggest question I get, well, what if I set this up to go to this charity, but that charity closes its doors?
Right.
Well, then what happens? Well, this actually has all the provisions to deal with stuff like that. Yeah.
Because that does happen.
It does happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, so that's, find the institution. Don't know the institution, then you can look at a donor advised fund. Yeah. Batch things, bunch things together so that if you're giving, you can still take advantage of the taxes, and you have have it in your cash flow to give. That's a really cool way of doing it.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
Just something to think about for people. But then how do we give to those different institutions or donor advised funds as tax efficiently as possible? We already talked about one.
Right.
You have a capital gain on a stock or an investment of some sort. It could be even land, right? It could be a capital asset, a house, land, whatever, cars.
Rental property you sold.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean that all financial charitable institutions want to receive this.
Right.
I don't know that I want to receive that 1953 Chevelle, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever. But you'll do it probably and sell it and take the money somehow, right? You'll figure it out. As a pastor, right?
Yeah, well, we'll figure it out.
But it's not ideal in some situations. So we can do that to save on taxes through a capital asset, through not having to realize that gain for ourselves. But let's say if you're a retiree, this is a really, really big one, and I want to give money to a charity. Well, a couple things that people need to understand is that once you reach 70 and a half, that's the magical age.
70 and a half.
70 and a half from an IRA. You can give directly from an IRA to a charitable institution. It has to be specifically a 501c3 and not pay the income tax on that distribution. Oh. So, for instance, let's say that you give $10,000 a year, like we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
Right? Instead of taking that from the IRA and then paying the taxes on it, and then actually having, let's say I take $10,000 from the IRA, I pay the taxes on it, whatever my tax rate is. Let's just say you paid $2,500 in taxes.
Okay.
So now you actually have $7,500 to give to the charity.
Okay.
Right? Well, why don't we just take $10,000 and send it directly to the charity, and then no taxes are due?
Right. Oh.
70 and a half, you can do that from an IRA. Okay. As the rules are in 2025.
Right. And no matter the standard deduction, none of that matters.
Doesn't really apply because what is the benefit to you is you don't have to realize it as income.
Oh.
Right. So if I'm that retiree and let's say all of my other income adds up to $65,000 and then I take a distribution from my IRA of $10,000, well, now my income is $75,000.
Right.
Well, the way the tax code is, it looks at the total number, not just that little bit. So you actually then could potentially push yourself into a different tax bracket or increase your Medicare premiums. There's a lot or Social Security tax. There's a lot of ways that income can affect you. So instead of taking that income, just give it directly to charity since you're giving to charity anyways.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of a cool way to do it.
That's a cool way to do it.
70 and a half, that's the important one. Now, when you reach what they call the required minimum distribution age, which depends on your date of birth, is 73 or 75 right now.
Okay.
Some people are already there at 70 and a half. Anyways, I won't get into all that, but that's the government changing the rules. But some people could already be at that age at 70 and a half when they reached 70 and a half. And they can give again. So let's say that your required distribution amount is $14,000 to take out of your IRA. Right. That's a calculation that's determined upon the December 31st value of the year prior for how much you have to take out in the current calendar year. So people like me do that calculation to tell you what your number is. Okay.
Right. Okay.
So if you give towards a charity, that will actually count towards your distribution. So in that situation of $14,000, they could have $10,000 go to charity. They still have to take out an additional $4,000.
Right.
But then they're only realizing $4,000 of actual income instead of $14,000 of income.
Okay. So I don't have to, so I'm not it's not showing up as income to me on the income tax side of things,
Right.
but it is still a distribution for the minimum
For the purpose of the required minimum distribution,
Got
RMD for short. So that is a really important concept for people to understand, because why not take advantage of it? If you're charitably inclined and you're a retiree over 70 and a half and you have an RMD, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do it.
Yeah, we get some of those checks usually in December.
But a lot of the churches in the area like me because I have a lot of clients doing that.
Yeah, December or January we get those. We get the checks in, and this is great. And again, it was like, we'll take your money how we can get it. So,
so anyway, so that's a really unique way. Now, by the way, you could give it to a church or entity or a donor advised fund or whatever, and those same rules apply. Okay, for all those charitable institutions, the same rules apply. So that's a really important way to take advantage of the rules, right? And not pay more than you need to. Another thing in charitable giving, if you're going to give to charity, like for instance, I have a client recently, and they just say, you know what, I'm going to split my estate 4 ways. I got 4 kids. Okay, great. They have an IRA, it's pretty substantial. And I'm like, are you still going to split that 4 ways? Like, yeah. But I also want to give, I also want to give to the church. So actually it's 5 ways technically, right? Now the church is going to get less in total, but they said, yeah, we'll just, they'll get 80% of it over here or whatever the number ends up being for how they were and then the church will get the rest of the 4, the whole estate. So I'm like, well, that's a substantial amount of money. Why don't we just reposition how we take that money and have the charitable money come from the IRA? And then all the other money, which the kids don't have to pay taxes on anyways, gets a step up in cost basis at death. Then they don't have to pay income tax on that. Whereas any dollar they take from that IRA is income tax to them as well.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that made any sense.
It made a little bit of sense, yeah.
The concept is instead of saying, I'm just going to break everything up evenly,
right?
Then I'm going to be smart where if I give money from an IRA to charity, the charity does not pay the taxes on it. Neither do the heirs because they didn't receive it. They receive the other taxable assets that are much more tax friendly for them at death.
Right. Okay.
So it's just a repositioning of the same amount of dollars are going where they wanted it to go.
Right.
But let's just be smart on the tax code on where we take those dollars from.
Right.
So that's another way of giving to charity through a retirement account. That is a sensible way to adjust things at death if you're going to give something through your estate plan or your will or that stuff.
Which is important is that's kind of that other way to give is, something in your will, kind of a bequest, estate gift, kind of thing. And those are weirdly like fallen out. I don't know if they've fallen out of fashion or what the deal is. I feel like when I started ministry, there was a lot more of that. And now there seems to be less.
It does actually. Cause I'll ask everybody, and I do a lot of estate education. And I'll ask if you're charitably inclined and that's about your giving today. And I said, when we do your beneficiary designations and things like that, do you want to include any kind of charitable giving? They're like, nah, my kids are my charity. Yeah. That's 99% of the time I get that answer.
Okay.
My kids are my charity, so it's going to go to my kids. I'm like, oh, I get that. That's fine.
Okay.
But
even, I have seen, recommendations for, 10%, that's kind of, once all my bills are settled, 10% of my estate goes to, whatever. And that's a really nice place to do, larger gifts to if you've got a church or a nonprofit that has that endowment, because, the challenge with kind of those big lump sums on the receiving end of it is, you're not hoping people to die, right? I mean, so it's not reliable, ongoing kind of income. So it's nice to have those kind of places to take, those one-off gifts and still put them to good use.
Yep.
Right. So you can even say people, we encourage people here to like say, leave some kind of bequest. And if you're, that is, you giving out of what you've accumulated through a lifetime, and if you want for that to continue to have an impact on this place, then, put it in the endowment. And then that, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, whatever it is going to continue to make an impact on this place, even after you're gone, and it doesn't make up for the fact that you're gone, by any means, but it's a way to kind of continue the legacy.
Yeah. It's a perpetual legacy, which is a good thing in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So that's that. So we have your ongoing from your income. We have your ongoing from potentially retirement assets, and then upon your death, do you want anything to go to charity? Just be smart on how you set up is my whole point of this.
Right.
And there are ways you can take advantage of the tax code to get the same amount of dollars to everyone that you wanted it to get to, just more tax efficiently.
Right.
Right.
And I think those are the questions important to ask, and why, again, we always say, work with a financial planner that can help you do this, because I wouldn't have known that there's a big difference. I mean, you kind of think of, your wealth or, whatever is kind of this one big thing, but those different pots have different rules associated with them, and there's no harm in trying to be as efficient on the tax side as possible.
No, I mean, it's common sense to do it that way, and it's not that we're gaming anything. We're just following the rules that are placed before us.
Yeah.
Right. And for us to not, this is the way the tax code is written, though, right? It's the onus is on us,
right,
to take advantage of the rules on how they're written. And if you don't take advantage, then it's really advantage the house being the government, right? It's like going gambling, which we don't encourage.
No gambling.
Discipline.
No gambling.
But so that's the concept, right? So we want to make sure that we give smart, give until it feels good, right? But let's take advantage of the things we can take advantage of. Let's make sure we're doing our research on what we're giving to.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great resources out there. But honestly, talking to a professional, if you don't already have one, is really going to be a good resource too, because they just see.
Right.
They just see it all the time, and they see the ones that are like, this one looks kind of interesting. I'm not really sure. Let's do a little more research here to help you make sure that dollar is going towards what you think it's going towards. Yeah. There's a ton of scammers out there. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. And I think the biggest thing is if you're not currently in the practice of giving, is to start.
Yes.
Right? I mean, just start giving a regular amount, and, there's always going to be times when there's, some special thing you want to give to and everything a little extra, that's great. But just starting that monthly, weekly, whatever it is, usually, it's time to however you get paid, wherever your income comes in. But start giving a regular and disciplined amount and see how that feels. And I love the, give until it feels good.
Yep.
And honestly, if you start to give and you're like, well, it doesn't really seem to do much for me, well, then chances are you're probably not giving enough.
Yeah.
Right? Because part of what you get when you give is you get that sense of, you get that good sense that comes from, being charitable and giving and all that kind of stuff. But there's a sense of ownership that develops over the thing that you're giving to, hopefully in a good way. And so when you see
not in a manipulative way, like I gave, so I want the flag over here.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Not that. We've all had that. But there's something to be said for like when you see that organization you're supporting doing good work in the world, you can think, oh, I've got a part of that.
Yes.
Like I'm a piece of that work, even if I'm not able to go and volunteer at the food pantry or the animal shelter or whatever it is, or I'm not always able to get to church, or can't do all the ministry I want to do there. Whatever it is, you still have a sense of, you're still
belonging,
and
being a part of something bigger than you.
Yeah, and you have a piece of it because you supported it. Yes. Oftentimes in one of the for most charities, the biggest limiting factor is almost always income. I don't know a charity in the world that won't tell you that they could do, more than they're currently doing, and the thing that's holding them back is, the income side of things. And that's true for, everybody, I guess, but it's definitely true in that world as well.
And it's funny because I always find it to be a good thing in some ways too, because like we talked about the food bank, they stretch $1 more than you and I ever could.
Oh my gosh.
And it creates ingenuity and it creates opportunity because we have to be smart with our dollars.
Right.
So I like it. It's a good system.
Yeah.
And it allows people to give because they want to give, and it allows people to still control. You don't know what you want to give to, like you said, just give to a donor advice fund.
Yeah.
And then you can decide where you want it to go. Or even if you want to do it for the rest of your life and then have that go to charity when you pass away. Mm-hmm. It's a great way to be a part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think there's a lot of well-being that comes from that, honestly, because statistics show that a lot of people who belong to a church or a society like that have just a longer, healthier life because you have a community that you're a part of.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's good, even if givers to dog, charity, like still, it's still being part of something bigger than you, and it gives you a sense of well-being that you don't otherwise have. It helps you release from that greed feeling. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very healthy approach to it. So charitable giving is important, and I think people have to sensibly think about it and give it a good amount of thought, and don't just do it on a whim. And I honestly don't encourage people to give to things they don't understand. It's like, I don't know. I was actually in a restaurant recently and they're like, do you want to give to da-da-da-da? I'm like, no, I don't know anything about it. I'm not giving. I don't know anything about it. It could be 99 cents off of $1 going to overhead and only a cent gets to the actual.
Right.
And so I just don't give unless I know. And I don't have time to look at this right now. So I just don't do it. But it's designed in a way to kind of make you feel bad. You're like, oh, well, I didn't give, so I feel bad.
Right, yeah. Like the roundup for 70 cents for charity. And I usually hit okay. I'm like, all right, I figure somebody's vetted it somewhere along the way. But, I mean, it's just...
That's the problem, though. You figure it and you don't know.
True. But that's also not... I mean, that's not a bad thing to do, those kind of occasional gifts and things like that. That's fine. But I think it's not quite the same as having that discipline practice.
Well, don't feel bad if you don't want to either, right? Like, if you want to give. If you don't want to give, don't feel bad about it. Just give intentionally is my whole point of that diatribe.
Yes.
That's all.
Intentionality is the big thing. And for me, it's a recognition that, no matter, most people have worked hard, most people work hard. They work hard for what they have, and which on one hand, is really important and to celebrate. But the other hand is like, none of us are an island. None of us are alone. We're all reliant on other people for some things.
We've all needed help at some point.
We've all needed help at some point. And so, it's giving is also an opportunity to reflect on how much you've received, right? You only have it to give it because you received it.
Yep. And
you received it from somewhere. And yes, probably by your own sweat and hard work, which is valuable, but also we get to live here. We get to live in this country. We get the freedoms that we have, and that's all a real blessing. And so the big part of giving is recognizing that I'm blessed to have something to give back.
Yep. I agree. I think it's a good way to end this one.
I think so.
I'm blessed to have something to give back.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you, Roy. This has been a good one.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we did
more
okay.
More to come. We're going to do one on donor advised funds to give people a lot more information on that. But I think that's a really fun, interesting topic to really wrap our arms around.
Yeah. And again, that's another one. If the dollar amounts are that low, that's another thing. Just start. If you're not sure, then okay, then just start putting a little away. Every month, see how that feels, and then figure out. And then for me in my world, I figured, if you've got that and you've got the discipline, the Holy Spirit will show up and point you at something that needs your support. I mean, there will be some good use that, down the line, even if you don't know what it is right now.
I agree.
So good. All right. Well, thank you, Roy.
Thank you, sir. It's always fun.
Always fun. Thank you all for joining us. As always, like, subscribe, share. And if you were charitably inclined, take a look at what you're giving right now. And do you feel good about it? And if you don't, then what would help you feel good about it? Because you should feel good about it. I agree. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
CWA is a Securities and Exchange Registered Investment Advisor. No content contained herein should be construed as an offer for investment advice or an offer for the purchase or sale of any security, insurance, or other investment product. Investments involve the risk of low loss, including loss of principal. Please consult with a qualified financial, tax, or legal professional before implementing any strategy presented here. Data presented here are obtained from believed reliable sources but cannot be guaranteed as to completeness or accuracy.